Manu, part again of this understanding is really building an understanding of how the whole legal function within organisations changed. You know, with the clients I know I work with, you know, the last 10 years has seen a transformation about the role of GCs, about the role of in-house legal and what they do and how they are managed and how they are accountable. You know, can you tell me and explain to us how the role of the GC has changed in the last few years?
So I think we've already heard that, you know, the role of a GC now is far more strategic and far more commercial than it ever has been. They're really expected not just to do the legal work, not just to manage the department, but be really active in the management of the business itself. So they have much more elevated positions. There are a lot more in number that are actually on the board now. They're actually being decision makers within the business itself. And that's where they need to demonstrate their value and their strategy. They also take on a wider purview. There's lots of GCs now that look after not just legal, but also HR and compliance and other aspects. And then within that, taking on responsibility for compliance and regulation, especially in an environment where regulation and compliance is continuing to proliferate, has become really important. So it's partly the commercial aspects and partly just knowing how to run a department. They're expected to run their own department as a business itself. So we know they're expected to do more with less, whatever that might mean. But it's making sure that they have understood their suppliers, they've understood how much they're paying for what, how they're running their own individual team, how they're motivating them, how they're going to keep retention, how they're progressing the juniors up and making sure there's an adequate pathway for them. And at the same time, they know what the risks are for the business and where the business needs to go. The GC themselves is more than often than not really spending more time with the board and understanding those issues. And then they want a more or less automated, self-reliant team that understands what they need to do to deliver on the business objectives and the business risks.
And how can law firms help you, you know, with the challenges that you're facing today and tomorrow? You know, how do we build this understanding? Because I think that, you know, one of the, you know, people keep talking about the importance of understanding the client's business and the understanding of the sort of personal individual. And,
yeah.
But, you know, I spend my life trying to encourage lawyers to let me listen, and they say, oh, but the client, you know, clients don't have time. You know, and they say, but we, you know, unless we understand, we can't add value. So, you know, we've got to invest the time in understanding. What is the best way to build the understanding beyond the scanning? Because, you know, we're still all individuals. So that there's, you know, that one-on-one relationship, I think, still possibly counts.
Yeah, absolutely counts. I mean, it is about that relationship. We've heard it a few times already. It's all about making sure that you understand the business that they are part of. What are the objectives of that particular business? What are the challenges of that business? Because that's going to feed back onto the GC and their role. And then how do you make the GC look good? It's always been true that, you know, the best way a law firm can win over its clients is by making the GC or making the in-house department look good. But now, what makes them look good is different to what it was before. Before, it was managing risk and doing good legal work. Now it's not just about that. It's about really adding value to the business. It's thinking more proactively about, you know, using an IP portfolio to generate revenue rather than just to manage risk. It's making sure that the contract process is really slick and automated, both from a technological perspective as well as a practical perspective, so that the contracts are signed quicker and the money comes in sooner. So it really depends from business to business, but ultimately it's really understanding those objectives and challenges and then working out how best we can help with them. Can we help with technology? Can we help with project management? Can we help with BD? I mean, in the sense that, you know, you will provide BD for your law firm, but to what extent could you provide BD disciplines to a GC to help him run his department from as a commercial unit almost? Yeah.
Okay.
And then in terms of that, that relationship, what we found is it's the simple things. It is getting in front of them, but it's also making sure there's a cultural fit as well as a personal fit and a professional fit, that you get on well with each other, and you understand each other, because 9 times out of 10 you don't do work with a firm or an organisation. It's with the person that you're dealing with.
And how do we develop that cultural understanding? That's a $50 million question, but what is it that, in particular, as BD can do, and as Terry mentioned, what are the sort of, let's forget everything else, let's do the 5 things that really add value and help us understand your culture? What would they be? And, I'll throw that out to the 3 of you.
Well, I think spending time together is obviously very important. Mm-hmm. So I think making sure, as we said before, that you've understood the business and its objectives, and the GC and his objectives, and that's often done best within like a 1 day or a half day session where everyone can get together and they can understand those issues. And then it's spending time together on a regular basis, socially as well as professionally, to be able to track what you've done in that offsite. But I think, and I'd be interested to turn it on the audience a little bit to understand to what extent they've got the power, the respect, the autonomy that we think they need to be able to deliver the value. Because a lot of it comes down to how they are perceived and how they are tooled up from within the law firms.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it's the old story about writing checks in marketing terms that the body corporate won't deliver on. And the worst thing you can do is oversell and underdeliver, or pick up, be hyper enthusiastic and then dump, and then pick up and then dump. Oh, it's the end of their quarter. Ha! I can tell. I've got a phone call. As opposed to it's the end of the client's financial year. They've had a quieter patch. Maybe they've got a little bit of money in hand for their pet project. Perhaps we can talk about that. That might release a nice 70 or 80k at the end of their year, not ours. But that'll help the numbers. So, I mean, I think the first thing for me is very much, as has just been said, about really taking the trouble to understand the individual, the sector, the context of the business. And the individual, it's not that difficult to get to know quite a lot about people and then check it out. One of those great things. Can I come to your office and have a cup of coffee, please? I'm really interested to hear about what you're doing. We've got an initiative we're thinking about in the business. I'd just like to test it out with you. If you've got half an hour, I'd be very grateful. Find the initiative. Suddenly, you've got something you're thinking about developing that might be of interest to me. An awful lot of GCs, not all, but a lot of them will go, that's interesting. I'd quite like to be involved in a pilot. Quite like to do something a bit innovative, a bit different. And they've thought, I might be relevant. Wow, groovy. Connection. You're starting to get over the line of engagement. Don't invite them to your premises. What's the point? You're dragging them across London. Go to theirs. If they're ready to come to yours because they're there anyway, fine. But make it as easy as possible. Be engaged with them. Show interest in their premises. Show interest in what they're doing. I think the second thing is look at how their organisations work in the time of year. Find things where you're helping them to set things into their budget for next year when they're doing their budget cycle. The part of what we do has a website with some articles on it. It's no coincidence that at the moment the second most popular article is planning your budget for next year among in-house lawyers. Why? Because September to November is when people do budgeting for January for company New Year. Awful lot of law firms do April New Year. Most corporates is either January or April. Don't miss the window. Help them to plan for stuff. If they want that GDPR project, they want that Brexit planning for next financial year, go and help them. We've got this really great thing. We think it might cost somewhere between X and Y for you, from what I understand of your market. Thought it might be helpful for you if you're shaping that thought up for your budget for next year to have some data points. After all, you've got a lot of data points. Help them with those. So understand them, connect with them regularly, tease them, encourage them, get them curious. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game. Think about their time cycle, and then make sure that what the checks you're writing are likely to actually be delivered by people internally, especially the first few. And when the ball is dropped, and it will be very, very quick to recover it. There's an old saying, it's not what goes wrong that matters more often than not, it's how you fix it that counts. So there's a tendency to be really worried about professional negligence, about hiding things on the cover, about being embarrassed. Actually, the most important thing is to be proactive in fixing when the first thing that goes wrong. You'll actually get a lot more loyalty that way.
I have a question for everybody, and that would follow on a tried but tired statement, people buy from people, et cetera. And we talked earlier about how you can enable lawyers to feel very comfortable engaging with GCs or whatever it may be out there. But my question to all of you, and we're seeing more and more of it, how many of you are actually going out into the field and meeting face-to-face with prospective clients or existing clients as business developers? Now, there we go. That is a new trend. That used to never happen, right? But if more and more of those engagements take place, then that comes back and becomes part of the big data set that lawyers then can share, and brings you back to the idea of, we know this environment, these people, their needs, their cycles, what their deadlines are, and where their challenges are, because we talk to them face to face. So there's nothing better than being able to meet face to face. And it's facilitating that, not just for your lawyers, but for yourselves. Because I see business developers now all over London and all over Europe actually going out and engaging, taking trips to Lisbon for 2 or 3 days and meeting with dozens of prospective pieces of business.
Totally agree with that, and it's a wonderful thing when you can say, I generated a lead which brought in a new client, and the first instruction was 300k, or 500k, or $1 million, because you brought it in. And I've seen this happen where someone was monitoring actively, so someone's putting out an advert on LinkedIn for paralegals to help with a particular area. They wrote and said, I'm not a paralegal, but if you've got an issue around this, I may be able to help. That ended up with a cup of coffee, which ended up with instruction with a new client. And that was all from a good piece of BD work, someone being proactive and going after their own initiative. That was a few months ago. But it was really good to see, and that's exactly,